The gun jammed. Jozef Gabčík squeezed the trigger again. Nothing. The Sten gun was dead metal in his hands. 50 meters away, Reinhard Heydrich stood up in his Mercedes. The Butcher of Prague, the architect of the final solution, the man who had sent hundreds of thousands to their deaths. He was reaching for his pistol. Gabčík had trained for 6 months for this moment. He had jumped from a plane into occupied Czechoslovakia. He had memorized this intersection. He had cleaned this weapon 17 times, and now the spring had failed. The bolt was frozen. The most important shot of World War II would never be fired. Jan Kubiš saw the jam. He pulled the pin on his grenade. The modified anti-tank explosive was wrapped in tape, 2 pounds of death. He threw it at the Mercedes. His arm was strong. His aim was slightly off. The grenade hit the rear wheel instead of the passenger compartment. The explosion tore through the morning. Glass shattered in buildings 3 blocks away. The Mercedes jumped. Metal fragments punched through the bodywork, through the leather seat, through Reinhard Heydrich's back. But it was not the metal that would kill him. It was horsehair. The stuffing from the seat cushion. Bacteria-laden animal fiber driven deep into his spleen. Heydrich collapsed against the lamppost. His uniform was torn, blood was spreading, but he was alive, conscious, angry. He raised his Luger. Kubiš went down. The grenade had shredded his face, fragments in his cheeks, his forehead, blood running into his eyes. Gabčík dropped the useless Sten. He pulled his Colt automatic. 6 rounds. He fired once. The shot went wide. Heydrich was stumbling. The shock was hitting him. His pistol wavered. Gabčík ran. East toward the alley. Kubiš staggered to his feet. He ran west. Both men disappeared into Prague. This is the story of how 7 men killed 1 Nazi, and how that one death led to 5,000 more. This is the story of Operation Anthropoid, the mission that succeeded, and the mission that failed. Both things were true. Both things were final. The decision to kill Heydrich was made in London. December 1941. President Edvard Beneš sat in his office in exile. 3 years earlier, Britain and France had betrayed Czechoslovakia at Munich. The Wehrmacht rolled in unopposed. The world moved on. Nobody remembered Czech resistance. Nobody cared about a small country between Germany and Poland. Beans needed something dramatic, something that would force the world to pay attention. The British Special Operations Executive had a solution. Kill a high-ranking Nazi. Make it spectacular. Make it impossible to ignore. The target list was short. Karl Hermann Frank. Too well guarded. Kurt Dalwige. Not important enough. Reinhard Heydrich. Perfect. Heydrich was 37 years old. Tall, blond, the perfect Aryan specimen. He played violin. He fenced. He was a devoted husband and father of 3 children. He was also a mass murderer. He had organized Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. Jewish businesses destroyed, synagogues burned, 91 Jews killed, 30,000 sent to concentration camps. That was 1938. Practice for what came later. January 1942. Heydrich chaired the Wannsee Conference. 20 men met in a villa on a lake. They had coffee and brandy. They discussed logistics, transportation schedules, camp capacity, gas chamber efficiency. They decided the fate of 11 million Jews. Heydrich provided the framework, the paperwork, the timetables of death. He was also Reichsprotector of Bohemia and Moravia. His job was to pacify the Czech population. He was very good at his job. 8,000 Czechs executed in his first 4 months. The number climbed daily. Public hangings, mass arrests, entire families disappeared. Prague lived in terror, but Heydrich had a weakness, arrogance. He refused a security detail. He thought Czechs were cowards. He drove the same route every morning. From his villa in Panenské Brzany to Prague Castle, no bodyguards, no escort vehicles, no bulletproof glass. He sat in the front passenger seat of an open Mercedes, reading papers, contemptuous of threats. British intelligence identified the vulnerability. They trained 2 men to exploit it. Jozef Gabčík was 29, Slovak, former Czech army sergeant. He escaped when Germany invaded, first to Poland, then France, then England. He spoke 3 languages. He was methodical, precise. He did not smile much. His instructors noted he showed no hesitation during training. When given an order, he executed it. No questions, no doubts. Jan Kubiš was 28, Moravian. Same escape route, different personality. He was warmer, more talkative. His specialty was explosives. He could build a bomb from household chemicals. He could also defuse one. His hands were steady. His nerves were calm. He had volunteered for the mission without knowing the target. That was the kind of man he was. They trained at Special Training School 25 in Scotland. 6 months of preparation, weapons, explosives, unarmed combat, tradecraft. They learned how to execute a surveillance detection route, how to identify a tail, how to lose one. They practiced dead drops, brush passes, one-time pad encryption. They memorized Prague street maps. They studied photographs of Heydrich. They rehearsed the assassination 43 times. December 28, 1941. A converted Halifax bomber took off from RAF Tangmere. Gabčík and Kubiš sat in the bomb bay. They wore British uniforms. If captured, they would be executed as spies. The Geneva Convention did not protect men who fought in enemy territory out of uniform. They changed into civilian clothes during the flight. The pilot had orders to drop them near Pilsen. The wind pushed them east. They landed 30 kilometers off target. The impact was hard. Kubiš twisted his ankle. Gabčík cut his hand on a rock. They buried their parachutes in the snow. The white silk disappeared into white ground. They walked toward Prague, 27 kilometers. They arrived at dawn. The Jindra resistance network was waiting. The network had been built over 2 years. Safe houses, radio operators, couriers. The Gestapo had been hunting them since 1939. They had arrested 43 members. Some died under interrogation. Some talked. The network survived by being paranoid. New members were vetted for months. Trust was earned in microscopic increments. The Moravec family provided the first safe house. The father was a railroad worker. The mother was a teacher. Their son Ata was 17. He ran messages between resistance cells. He carried the messages in his school bag, books and papers and orders that could get him shot. He did this 5 days a week. He was very good at looking ordinary. The barn was cold. The walls were thin. Gabčík and Kubiš slept on straw. They ate what the family could spare. Bread, cheese, sometimes meat. The rationing was severe. The Germans took most of the food. What remained was barely enough. The Moravec family gave portions of their own meals. They told the paratroopers this was fine. They were lying. Everyone was always lying in occupied territory. The days were spent planning. The nights were spent waiting, waiting for orders, waiting for supplies, waiting for the right moment. Intelligence work was 90% waiting, 10% action. The action lasted seconds. The waiting lasted months. January 1942 brought complications. London sent more paratroopers. Adolf Opalka and his team, Jozef Walczyk, Karol Svoboda, 2 more drops, 7 men total, too many. The safe houses were overcrowded. The Moravec barn had 3 men. The Novak attic had 2. Security protocols broke down. More agents meant more exposure. More exposure meant higher probability of capture. The Gestapo was very good at finding people. They had methods, systematic methods. They started with informants. Every occupied country had collaborators, people who informed for money, for safety, for revenge against neighbors. The Gestapo paid well. They also had quotas. Every informant was expected to produce names. If they failed, they became suspects themselves. When informants failed, the Gestapo used surveillance. They watched resistance families. They noted visitors. They photographed people entering and leaving. They built networks of association. If person A met person B, and person B met person C, then A and C were connected. The logic was simple. The execution was methodical. When surveillance failed, they used interrogation. The interrogation protocols were refined through practice. Start with isolation. Prisoners were kept in darkness 4 days. No food, no water, no sleep. Disorientation broke some people immediately. If isolation failed, they used pain. Electric shocks, beatings, broken bones. The pain was calibrated, enough to break resistance, not enough to cause unconsciousness. Unconscious prisoners could not talk. If pain failed, they used fear. They brought in family members, parents, spouses, children. They tortured them in front of the prisoner. The screaming usually produced results. The average resistance member lasted 3 days under interrogation. Some lasted less. Some lasted more. But everyone had a breaking point. The Gestapo understood this. They had broken hundreds of networks across occupied Europe. The Czechoslovak resistance was no different. Gabčík and Kubiš understood their life expectancy. 6 months. That was the estimate. Every day increased the risk. Every contact was potential exposure. Every safe house could be compromised. They accepted this. Acceptance was the only way to function. February. The surveillance of Heydrich began. Gabčík rode the tram past Prague Castle 17 times. He noted the schedule. Heydrich left his villa at 9:30. The drive took 25 minutes. The Mercedes always slowed at a hairpin turn near Holsovice. The street curved sharply. The driver had to downshift. For 10 seconds, the car was vulnerable. Gabčík memorized the intersection. 3 buildings on the north side, apartments above, shops below, an alley between the first and second building. The alley led to a back street. 2 escape routes from there, east toward Liban, west toward the river. He noted the pedestrian traffic. Workers walked to the factories between 9 and 10. Women shopped in the morning. The tram ran every 12 minutes. Normal life provided cover. Abnormal behavior attracted attention. The key was to look like everyone else. Kubiš conducted his own surveillance. He walked through the intersection 14 times. He timed the traffic lights. 90 seconds on green, 40 seconds on red. The timing mattered. They needed the light to be green. Green meant to moving traffic. Moving traffic meant confusion after the explosion. Confusion meant escape. He identified the weak points in the Mercedes. The fuel tank was behind the rear axle. A grenade there would cause a fire. But fire was unpredictable. Heydrich might escape. The passenger compartment was better. A grenade inside the car would kill everyone, but getting a grenade inside required precision. One mistake and it would bounce away. March brought more planning. London wanted options. 3 attack scenarios. Scenario 1, shoot Heydrich in his car. Simple but risky. The Sten gun had to work perfectly. One jam and the mission failed. Scenario 2, throw a grenade at the car. More reliable but less precise. The grenade might miss. Scenario 3, combination. If the gun jammed, use the grenade. This was the plan they selected. The weapons arrived in April. A parachute dropped northeast of Prague. 3 containers, 2 Sten guns, 4 grenades, ammunition. The Sten guns were tested in the woods. Both worked. Gabčík cleaned his weapon obsessively. He disassembled it, cleaned each part, reassembled it. He did this twice a day. The gun had to be perfect. The grenades were modified. British No. 73 anti-tank explosives. Kubiš added tape. The tape increased fragmentation. When the grenade exploded, the tape would shred into metal sharp strips. The strips would act as additional shrapnel. The modification was clever. It was also dangerous. Too much tape and the explosion would be contained. Too little and the fragments would scatter uselessly. Kubiš tested the weight. 2 pounds. He practiced throwing. The grenade had to travel 15 feet. Accurately, he threw rocks of similar weight. 100 throws per day. His arm grew strong. His accuracy improved. By May, he could hit a bucket at 15 feet 9 times out of 10. May brought pressure from London. Beans was impatient. The Americans were still unimpressed with Czechoslovak resistance. The British were focused on North Africa. Beans needed something dramatic, something that would make headlines. A dead Nazi would do that. Preferably a famous Nazi. Heydrich qualified. The date was set, May 27, 1942. a Wednesday, weather forecast, clear skies. Temperature, moderate, backup date, June 3rd. After that, the mission would abort. Summer meant longer days. Longer days meant more witnesses. More witnesses meant less chance of escape. May 26th. Final preparations. Gabčík cleaned the Sten one last time. He loaded the magazine. 32 rounds. He chambered the first round. The bolt slid smoothly. The gun felt perfect. Kubiš assembled his grenade. He taped it carefully. The balance had to be right. He held it, felt the weight. It felt right. They did not sleep that night. Sleep seemed pointless. By the next evening they would be dead or in hiding. Sleep would not change that outcome. They sat in the Moravec barn. They did not talk. Talking seemed equally pointless. Mrs. Moravec brought them food before dawn, bread and cheese. She said nothing. Her eyes were wet. She knew what was coming. Not the details, but she knew men who did not sleep were men about to do something final. Atta asked if he could help. Gabčík told him no. The boy's face fell. He wanted to be part of history. He wanted to matter. History would notice him soon enough, just not in the way he imagined. The morning of May 27th was cold for late spring. Gabčík wore a raincoat over his suit. The Sten hung from a strap under the coat. The weight pulled on his shoulder. He adjusted the strap. The gun had to come up fast, 3 seconds maximum. From concealment to firing position. He had practiced this 500 times. It had to be automatic. Kubiš carried his briefcase, standard brown leather. Thousands of men in Prague carried identical briefcases. His contained a bomb. This fact was not visible. Invisibility was survival. Jozef Walczak had the mirror, a small shaving mirror. He would be the lookout. His position was at the top of the hill. He had a clear view down the road from Panenské Březiny. When he saw the green Mercedes, he would flash the mirror, twice. 2 flashes meant go. They took separate trams to Holzovice. Gabčík arrived first, 8:45. The intersection was busy, workers heading to factories, women with shopping bags, a postman on a bicycle. Normal life was the best disguise. Kubiš arrived at 9. He stood at the tram stop across the street. His briefcase rested beside his feet. Casual, unremarkable, a man waiting for a tram. Walczak was in position by 9:15. The hill offered good visibility. He could see 2 kilometers down the road. The mirror was in his pocket. His hand rested on it. Ready. 9:30 came. No signal. 9:45. Still nothing. Heydrich was late. This had never happened during surveillance. His schedule was always precise. The delay meant something had changed. Changed schedule meant changed circumstances. Changed circumstances meant abort. Gabčík's hand tightened on the Sten under his coat. The gun was warm from his body heat. The metal felt alive, ready. But without the target, the gun was just metal. 9:55. Walczak's mirror flashed. Once, twice, the signal. The Mercedes was coming. Gabčík's heart rate increased. Adrenaline hit his system. His vision sharpened. Time seemed to slow. This was normal. The body preparing for violence. Evolution doing its work. The green Mercedes appeared at the top of the hill. The car was distinctive. Only high-ranking Nazis drove cars. Fuel was rationed. Private vehicles were rare. The Mercedes announced Heydrich's importance, even before anyone saw his face. The car began the descent. The driver was SS Oberscharführer Johannes Klein. He was competent, not paranoid. He saw no threats in a Wednesday morning commute. His focus was on the road. The hairpin turn was sharp. The Mercedes had to slow down. Heydrich sat in the front passenger seat. He wore his gray SS uniform. His cap was off. His blonde hair was visible. He was reading papers, documents that required his signature, orders that would send people to camps, to gas chambers, to death. He signed them while riding to work. Bureaucracy was efficient that way. The car entered the turn. Klein downshifted. The engine noise changed. Lower gear, slower speed. The car was traveling 20 kilometers per hour, walking speed. Gabčík stepped into the street. The Sten came up. The motion was smooth, practiced, 500 repetitions paying off. The gun leveled at Heydrich. Gabčík's finger found the trigger. The muscle memory was perfect. He squeezed. Nothing happened. The trigger moved. The firing pin fell. But the bolt was frozen. The spring had failed. The gun was dead. Gabčík squeezed again. Still nothing. The most important shot of his life refused to fire. Klein saw the gun. His training took over. He hit the brakes. Hard. The Mercedes stopped in the middle of the intersection. Rubber screamed on cobblestone. The car rocked forward, then back. Heydrich stood up. His reaction was not fear. It was rage. Someone had dared to attack him. In his city. On his street. The audacity was incomprehensible. He reached for his Luger. The holster flap was fastened. His fingers fumbled with it. The fumbling bought seconds. Kubiš saw the jam. His brain processed the information instantly. The gun had failed. The mission was failing. He had one option. He pulled the pin on the grenade. The spoon flew off. The fuse was burning. 4 seconds. He had 4 seconds to throw and take cover. He threw. The grenade tumbled through the air, spinning. The tape made it aerodynamically unstable. The trajectory was slightly off. The grenade hit the rear wheel, not the passenger compartment, not Heydrich directly, the wheel. The explosion was massive. The blast wave radiated outward. Glass shattered. The Mercedes jumped 6 inches off the ground. The rear bodywork peeled open. Shrapnel flew in all directions. Kubiš took fragments in his face. The pain was instant, blinding. He fell. Heydrich was thrown back into his seat. The blast wave hit him. But the real damage was quieter, smaller, pieces of the seat cushion, horsehair stuffing, springs, leather fragments, all driven into his back by the explosion. The largest piece was 7 centimeters long. It penetrated his left side. It tore through his uniform, through his skin, through his diaphragm, into his spleen. The horsehair carried bacteria, anthrax spores from the animal hide, Clostridium from the processing. The bacteria entered his bloodstream immediately. The infection began before the smoke cleared. Heydrich tried to stand. The shock was hitting him. His vision narrowed. His legs felt weak. But rage kept him upright. He got the holster open. The Luger came out. He aimed at Gabčík. The sights wavered. His hand was shaking. He fired. The shot went wide. Gabčík dropped the Sten. The gun clattered on the cobblestones. Useless metal. He pulled his Colt automatic from his pocket. 6 rounds. He fired once. The shot missed. Heydrich was stumbling. The shock was winning. His pistol lowered. Gabčík ran. The alley was 50 feet away. He covered the distance in seconds. His legs pumped. His breath came hard. Behind him, Klein was shouting, "German, commands to stop." Gabčík did not stop. The alley mouth swallowed him. He was gone. Kubiš pushed himself up. Blood ran into his eyes. He could not see clearly. The briefcase was gone, blown away by the blast. He staggered toward the tram stop. A woman screamed. He ignored her. His legs moved. Each step was agony. His face was on fire. A baker's truck stopped. The driver was Czech. He saw a wounded man. He saw Germans shouting. He made a choice. He opened the door. Kubiš climbed in. The truck drove away. Klein watched it go. His orders were clear. Protect Heydrich. That meant staying with Heydrich, not chasing bombers. Heydrich collapsed against the lamppost. The post was cold iron. The cold felt good against his face. Everything else was pain. His back was screaming. Something was wrong inside. He could feel it, tearing, bleeding. He tried to breathe deeply. The breath caught. His diaphragm was not working properly. A Czech policeman approached. Carefully, Heydrich still had his pistol. The policeman raised his hands. He said something in Czech. Heydrich did not speak Czech. He spoke German. He ordered the man to call an ambulance. The policeman understood the tone, if not the words. Klein lifted Heydrich. The SS officer was heavy, tall, muscular. Klein was strong, but Heydrich was dead weight. A delivery truck stopped. The driver agreed to help. Transport Heydrich to the hospital. Klein helped load him into the truck bed. Heydrich lay on the metal floor. The vibrations from the engine traveled through his body. Each bump was agony. His uniform was soaked with blood. He could feel it spreading. warm and sticky. The horsehair was working deep into his organs. The bacteria were multiplying. The clock was ticking. The Bulovka hospital was 3 kilometers away. The truck arrived in 6 minutes. Doctors rushed out. They had been alerted. A high-ranking Nazi was coming. The hospital had 2 choices: save him or let him die. Saving him was safer. The Gestapo would ask questions either way, but saving him showed effort. Dr. Holbaum performed the examination. He found multiple wounds, shrapnel in the ribs, metal fragments in the back. The largest wound was 10 centimeters long, deep. It had penetrated the abdominal cavity. The spleen was damaged, possibly ruptured. Surgery was necessary. Immediately. The surgery took 3 hours. Holbaum removed metal fragments, leather pieces, upholstery springs. The debris field was extensive, but he could not find all the horsehair. The fibers were too small, too deep. They had spread through the abdominal cavity. Some pieces were microscopic. The bacteria rode those pieces into organs Holbaum could not reach. Heydrich woke in the recovery room. The pain was manageable. Morphine helped. He was alive, conscious. That seemed like success. He asked about his attackers. Klein told him they had escaped. Heydrich's face darkened. He gave orders. Find them. Use the entire Prague garrison. Use the Gestapo. Use informants. Find them and bring them to him alive. He wanted to watch them die. The Gestapo mobilized within an hour. Prague became a prison. Every entrance, every exit, blocked. Papers were checked. Faces were photographed. 700 Gestapo agents and SS soldiers flooded the streets. Every safe house was suspect. Every resistance contact was at risk. Gabčík reached the Novak family by noon. He ran 14 kilometers. His lungs were burning. His legs were rubber, but he was alive, uninjured. The Novaks gave him water, food, a place to hide. Their attic was cramped, low ceiling, poor ventilation, but secure. The Gestapo had never searched this address. Kubiš arrived at the Moravec house 2 hours later. His face was bandaged. Mrs. Moravec had cleaned the wounds. The fragments had missed his eyes by centimeters. Lucky. But luck was relative. The wounds were infected. The street had been filthy. The explosion had driven dirt and bacteria into his face. Antibiotics were not available to resistance fighters. The infection would have to heal on its own. The radio broadcast came at 3 o'clock. An assassination attempt on Reichsprotector Heydrich. The criminals had fled. A reward was offered. 1 million Reichsmarks for information leading to their capture. 1 million Reichsmarks was a fortune, enough to live comfortably for years. The Gestapo understood economics. Loyalty had a price, usually lower than 1 million. Martial law was declared at 4 o'clock, curfew at 7. No gatherings of more than 3 people, no travel without permits. All businesses closed by 6. Prague stopped moving. The city held its breath. The executions began at 6 o'clock. The Gestapo had a list: suspected resistance members, known associates of resistance families, people who had been questioned before and released. Now they were arrested again. This time there would be no release. They were taken to police headquarters. They were shot in the basement, 10 that first day. The number would climb. Gabčík and Kubiš listened to the radio reports. They understood what was happening, what they had unleashed. The price of their mission was being paid by others, by people who had never agreed to the attack, who had never fired a weapon, who wanted only to survive the war. London sent congratulations via coded radio transmission. The mission was a success. Heydrich was wounded. The world would notice. Beans was pleased. Churchill was satisfied. The propaganda value was immense. The death toll was not mentioned. Not yet. That accounting would come later. Heydrich's condition stabilized on May 28th. The morphine kept the pain manageable. His vital signs were good. Blood pressure normal. Heart rate steady. The doctors were optimistic. The surgery had been successful. The wounds would heal. Heydrich would recover. But the horsehair was working. Deep in his abdomen, the bacteria were spreading, multiplying. The infection was establishing itself. The sulfonamide drugs were not working. The antibiotics were too weak, or too late. or both. May 29th. Heydrich's fever climbed, 38 degrees Celsius. Not dangerous yet, but rising. The doctors increased the antibiotics. They changed the dressings. They monitored his blood. The infection markers were increasing. White blood cell count was elevated. Something was wrong inside. The Gestapo investigation intensified. They brought in Heinrich Müller, head of the Gestapo. Müller was a professional. He did not get angry. He did not make threats. He simply had people arrested, systematically, block by block. Anyone who could not account for their whereabouts on May 27th between 9:30 and 10 was questioned. The questioning was thorough. They arrested 200 people in 3 days. Some were resistance members. Most were not. The Gestapo did not care. The interrogations would sort them out. Pain revealed truth. That was Müller's philosophy. Apply enough pressure and everyone breaks. Everyone tells what they know. The resistance network began to fragment. 3 members talked on May 30th. They gave up safe house addresses. The addresses led to more arrests. The arrests led to more interrogations. The cascade was starting. Once it started, it could not be stopped. June 1st. Heydrich's fever reached 39 degrees. The infection was spreading. His spleen was failing. The organ had been damaged by shrapnel. Now infection was finishing what the explosion had started. The doctors operated again. They removed the spleen. The surgery went well, but the infection remained. The Gestapo found the Sten gun. A pedestrian reported it, lying in the alley where Gabčík dropped it. The gun was British. The serial number was intact. The Gestapo contacted London via neutral channels. The gun had been supplied to Czechoslovak forces in exile. This proved British involvement. This proved the assassination was ordered from London. Karl Hermann Frank was pleased. Proof of British complicity justified expanded reprisals. June 2nd. More arrests. 400 total now. The prisons were full, overcrowded. The Gestapo did not slow down. They converted schools into detention centers, sports halls, any large building. The detainees were sorted. Resistance members in one group, suspected sympathizers in another, ordinary citizens in a third. The sorting was arbitrary. Life and death decided by a Gestapo clerk with a checklist. Heydrich's fever broke on June 3rd. The temperature dropped. The doctors were relieved. The crisis had passed. Heydrich was conscious, alert. He asked about the investigation. Müller briefed him. Progress was being made. Names were being obtained. Arrests were continuing. Heydrich nodded. He was satisfied. He slept. The fever returned on June 4th at midnight. Higher this time, 40 degrees. The infection had not been stopped. It had only paused. The bacteria had spread to his bloodstream. Septicemia, blood poisoning. The sulfonamides were useless. The infection was too advanced, too widespread. Heydrich's organs began to fail. The kidneys first, then the liver. The doctors could do nothing. They administered morphine. They kept him comfortable. They waited. Death was now inevitable. Just a matter of time. Heinrich Himmler flew to Prague on June 4th. He visited Heydrich in the hospital. The 2 men spoke privately. The conversation was not recorded. Himmler emerged 15 minutes later. His face was blank. He said nothing to the doctors. He returned to Berlin. Heydrich died at 4:30 in the morning, June 4th, 1942, 8 days after the assassination attempt. The official cause was septicemia, secondary to wounds sustained in a terrorist attack. The unofficial cause was horsehair, bacteria, microscopic life killing the architect of industrial death. The irony was lost on no one. Hitler received the news at breakfast. He threw his plate. China shattered on the wall. He ordered immediate reprisals. Total. Absolute. The Czech people would learn the price of resistance. The price would be measured in blood. Karl Hermann Frank was given command of the reprisals. Frank was thorough. He understood collective punishment. He had practiced it in Poland, in Austria. Now he would perfect it in Czechoslovakia. The goal was not justice. Justice was irrelevant. The goal was terror. Terror was the message. Attack the Reich and everyone dies. The Gestapo investigation had produced names. Villages where resistance was suspected. Lidice was on the list. The village was 20 kilometers from Prague. A resistance member had been traced there. The connection was thin. One person, one link. Frank did not care. Lidice would be the example. June 9th. The Gestapo surrounded Lidice at midnight. Every exit was blocked. Nobody could leave. Nobody could escape. The villagers woke to searchlights and machine guns. They were ordered outside, men in one group, women and children in another. They stood in the village square, confused, terrified, not understanding what was happening. The men were searched, 173 of them, ages 15 to 84. They were marched to a farm at the edge of the village. Mattresses were propped against a barn wall. The mattresses were to catch bullets, to prevent ricochets, efficiency. The executions began at dawn, groups of 10, machine guns. The bodies fell into a row. The next group was brought forward. They had to step over the bodies. They had to stand where their neighbors had fallen. The blood soaked into the ground. The earth drank it. The process took 7 hours. 173 men, all dead. The women were loaded onto trucks, taken to a holding facility, sorted. Young women went to Ravensbrück concentration camp. Older women went to camps inside Bohemia. The sorting was clinical. The crying was ignored. 7 trucks. 195 women, gone by noon. The children were next. 98 of them, ages infant to 16. They were sorted differently. Aryan-looking children were separated. Blonde hair, blue eyes, German enough features. These went to German families for Germanization. Adoption by people who would raise them as Germans, to forget their Czech identity, their murdered fathers, their deported mothers. The remaining children were loaded onto trucks, 82 of them, 2 Czech, not Aryan enough, no use to the Reich. They were driven to Chelmno extermination camp. The camp had gas vans, mobile gas chambers. The children were told they were going to new homes. They were loaded into the vans. The doors were locked. Engine exhaust was pumped inside, carbon monoxide. The children died within 20 minutes, all 82. The bodies were burned. The ashes were scattered. Lidice itself was destroyed. The buildings were burned. Explosives leveled what remained. The rubble was bulldozed flat. The ground was plowed. The cemetery was excavated. The graves were emptied. The bodies were removed. Every trace of the village was erased. Maps were redrawn. Lidice ceased to exist. The process took 3 days, June 10th to June 12th. One village, 273 dead, 195 deported. The number was specific, documented. The bureaucracy of genocide kept excellent records. Lázaki was next, June 24th. Another village, another tenuous connection. The Gestapo had found a radio transmitter nearby. Someone in Lázaki must have known, must have helped. The logic was simple. The execution was simpler. 33 people shot, the entire adult population. The children were sent to camps. The village was burned. Another dot erased from the map. The reprisals spread. Every day brought new executions. The Gestapo had quotas, 10 per day minimum, sometimes 20, sometimes 50. The numbers varied. The dying did not stop. Gabčík and Kubiš heard about Lidice on June 11th. They were in separate safe houses. The radio broadcast the news. A village destroyed. Every man executed. Women and children deported. The announcer's voice was matter of fact, as if reading crop reports, as if 273 deaths were statistics. Gabčík sat in the Novak attic. He did not move for 3 hours. Mrs. Novak brought him food. He did not eat. She asked if he was all right. He did not answer. How could he answer? 173 men had been shot because he pulled a trigger on a gun that jammed. The mathematics of guilt were beyond calculation. Kubiš had a different reaction. He argued with Opalka. The other paratroopers were in the safe house. They heard the news together. Kubiš said they should surrender, turn themselves in, stop the reprisals. Opalka said no. Surrender meant torture. Torture meant the entire network would be exposed. More people would die, not fewer. The argument lasted 2 hours. Kubiš insisted surrender would save lives. The Nazis would stop killing if they had the assassins. Opalka asked if Kubiš believed that, really believed it. The Nazis did not stop killing because they captured someone. They stopped killing when they ran out of people to kill. Surrender would change nothing except who died next. Kubiš knew Opalka was right. He did not want Opalka to be right. He wanted there to be a way to stop what they had started. There was no way. The machine was running. The machine would not stop until it exhausted itself. The Gestapo pressure increased. They arrested 60 people per day. The interrogations produced more names. The names led to more arrests. The cascade accelerated. The resistance network was collapsing section by section, cell by cell. June 13th, the Gestapo arrested Reverend Vladimir Petrek. He was a priest at the Church of Saints Cyril and Methodius. The church was in central Prague, Gothic architecture, stone walls 3 feet thick, a crypt below the main floor. The crypt was accessible through a small opening in the floor. The opening was hidden behind the altar. Petrek had been helping the resistance, storing supplies, hiding messages. He had never hidden people. Not until June 15th. That day, 4 paratroopers arrived at his church, Gabčík, Kubiš, Valcik, Bublik. They asked for sanctuary, temporary. A few days while they found new safe houses. The safe houses were all compromised. They had nowhere else to go. Petrek said yes. He showed them the crypt. The entrance was narrow. The space below was larger. 10 feet by 20 feet. Stone walls. No windows. One entrance. Petrek brought them food, water, blankets. He told them to be quiet. Services were held daily. The church had parishioners, German parishioners. One wrong sound, and they would all die. June 16th, the Gestapo arrested the Moravec family. Someone had talked. One of the captured resistance members had mentioned the name. The Gestapo came at dawn. 6 agents. They surrounded the house. They knocked. Mr. Moravec answered. He was taken immediately. No questions, just handcuffs. Mrs. Moravec was next. She was in the kitchen. She heard the commotion. She knew what was happening. She had carried a cyanide capsule for 2 years, hidden in a locket around her neck, for exactly this moment. She bit down. The capsule cracked. Potassium cyanide dissolved on her tongue. The poison acted in seconds. She collapsed. Dead before the Gestapo reached the kitchen. Atta was upstairs. He heard his mother fall. He tried to run. The Gestapo caught him in the hallway. They brought him to Gestapo headquarters, the Petchek Palace. The building had a reputation. People entered. They did not leave the same, if they left at all. Karel Kurda was in the palace that day. Kurda was a paratrooper, part of a different operation. He had been dropped in April. His mission had failed. His team had been scattered. He was alone, hunted. The Gestapo had offered amnesty. Turn in the other paratroopers and Lev, refuse and die with them. Kurda chose life. He gave the Gestapo everything, names, addresses, safe houses. He told them about the church, the crypt, the 4 men hiding there. The Gestapo verified his information. They watched the church. They saw Petrek bringing food. They saw the pattern. They knew. Atta was interrogated by Heinrich Punwitz. Punwitz was efficient. He did not waste time with threats. He showed Atta the instruments, the pliers, the electrodes, the hammers. He explained what would happen, in detail, the breaking of fingers, the application of electric current, the systematic destruction of the human body. Atta was 17. He had been brave. He had carried messages for the resistance. He had risked death many times. But courage has limits. Everyone has limits. Atta reached his in that room. He confirmed what Kurda had said. The church, the crypt, the 4 men. He gave the Gestapo what they wanted. He cried while doing it. The crying did not make it less true. June 17th, the Gestapo finalized their assault plan. 700 soldiers, Waffen-SS units, Gestapo agents, machine guns, grenades, tear gas, explosives. They would surround the church at 4 a.m. Darkness gave them advantage. The paratroopers would be sleeping, disoriented. The assault would be overwhelming. The paratroopers were not sleeping. Gabčík had heard nothing from the resistance network in 2 days. No messages, no visits. Silence meant something had gone wrong. He told the others. They prepared. They checked their weapons. They had 2 Sten guns, 4 pistols, 6 grenades, ammunition for maybe 20 minutes of fighting. After that, they would have only their last bullets, the ones they had saved for themselves. 4 in the morning, June 18, 1942. The SS surrounded the church. 700 men. They formed a perimeter, 3 blocks in every direction. Nobody would escape. Karl Hermann Frank was present. He wanted to watch. He wanted to be able to report directly to Hitler. 7 paratroopers would die today. Frank wanted the details. The assault began at 4:30. 3 paratroopers were in the choir loft. Opalka, Svoboda, Bublik. They had chosen the high ground, better firing positions, better visibility. They were awake, waiting. When the SS approached the door, they opened fire. The Sten guns chattered. 9mm rounds punched through the wooden door. The SS scattered. 2 soldiers went down. The others took cover. They returned fire. Hundreds of rounds. The choir loft disintegrated. Wood splinters flew. Stone chips scattered. Bullets tore through everything. Opalka took 3 rounds in the chest. He kept firing. His Sten emptied. He reloaded. The magazine clicked into place. He resumed firing. Blood soaked his shirt. He kept firing. His magazine emptied again. He did not reload. He collapsed. His last thought was unclear. Perhaps relief. Perhaps regret. The thought died with him. Svoboda was hit in the head. The bullet entered above his left eye, exited below his right ear. He died instantly. His finger was still on the trigger. The gun continued firing for 2 seconds. Muscle spasm, the body finishing what the mind had started. Then stillness. Bublik was wounded. Multiple hits, chest, abdomen, leg. He was still conscious, still capable. He had 1 grenade left. He pulled the pin. He held it, waiting. The SS stormed the choir loft. 6 of them. They saw him. They saw the grenade. They tried to retreat. Too late. Bublik released the spoon. The grenade exploded. Bublik and 3 SS soldiers died together. Instant, simultaneous, democratic. 4 paratroopers remained in the crypt. Gabčík, Kubiš, Valcik, Hruby. They heard the fighting above. They heard the explosions. They heard the silence after. They knew what silence meant. They were alone now. The last 4. The crypt would be their grave. The SS tried the crypt entrance. The opening was too small. 1 man at a time could go down. That made it a death trap. The paratroopers could fire up through the opening. The SS would be silhouettes against light. Perfect targets. The SS commander understood this. He did not send men down. He sent grenades. The grenades bounced down the crypt stairs. The explosions were contained by stone walls. The blast waves had nowhere to go. They reflected, amplified. The paratroopers pressed against the walls. The walls offered some protection. Not much, but some. 5 grenades, 6, 7. The crypt filled with the smoke. Cordite, dust. The paratroopers tied wet cloths over their faces. The cloths filtered some smoke. Not all. Breathing became difficult. Their eyes burned. Their lungs burned. But they were alive. They returned fire through the opening. The SS could not descend. The SS brought fire hoses. They would flood the crypt, drown the paratroopers. Force them out. The water pressure was high. The water came fast, cold, dirty. Prague city water mixed with sediment from old pipes. The water filled the crypt, inch by inch. The paratroopers retreated to the far wall. Higher ground, not high enough. The water reached their ankles, their knees, their waists. The crypt had no drainage. The water had nowhere to go except up. The paratroopers would drown or surrender. The SS waited. They had time. The paratroopers did not. Gabčík checked his pistol. 6 rounds remaining. He looked at Kubiš. Kubiš nodded. They both understood. Valcik understood. Hruby understood. They all understood. The choice was clear. Drowning or bullets. Bullets were faster, cleaner, more certain. The water reached their chests. Gabčík spoke first. He said they had done what they came to do. Heydrich was dead. The mission was accomplished. The rest was just survival. They had survived longer than expected. 6 months, exactly as predicted. The prediction had been accurate. Kubiš said he was sorry about Lidice, about the reprisals, about everything that came after. Gabčík said it was not their fault. The Nazis chose to kill those people. The Nazis always chose to kill, with or without provocation. Heydrich would have killed thousands more if he had lived. The mathematics justified the mission. Kubiš wanted to believe that. He did not entirely succeed, but he tried. The water reached their necks. Time was gone. The decision had to be made. Now. Gabčík raised his pistol. He looked at the others. They raised their pistols. 4 men, 4 guns, 4 last bullets. They nodded to each other. The nod was goodbye. The nod was acknowledgement. The nod was solidarity. Brothers in arms, brothers in death. Gabčík pulled the trigger first. The bullet entered his temple, exited the opposite side. His body collapsed into the water. The water turned red. Wannsee fired second. Same result, same ending. Ruby third. The shots echoed in the stone chamber. The echoes faded. Silence returned. Kubiš was last. He held the pistol to his head. His hand was steady. His face was calm. He thought about his mother, his family, the Moravec family. Atta, Mrs. Moravec taking cyanide to protect them. All the people who had helped, all the people who had died. He thought about Heydrich, the man they had killed. Whether it was worth it, whether anything was ever worth it. He pulled the trigger. The shot echoed. The echo faded. The water continued rising. 4 bodies floated in a stone chamber below a church in Prague. The SS waited 30 minutes. They wanted to be sure. No movement, no sounds, only water lapping against stone. The SS drained the crypt. They used pumps, industrial pumps. The water evacuated slowly. 3 hours. When the water was gone, they retrieved the bodies. All 7 paratroopers accounted for. All dead. The SS photographed them. Documentation. Proof for the report. Proof for Berlin. Proof for Hitler. Karl Hermann Frank was satisfied. He had delivered what he promised. The assassins were dead. Justice was served. Nazi justice. The kind measured in corpses and photography. He called Berlin. He spoke directly to Hitler. Hitler congratulated him. The reprisals would continue. Just to be certain, just to send the message. Fear was the message. Terror was the method. Death was the result. The executions continued through June. 10 per day, 20 per day. The numbers varied. The Gestapo had lists, long lists. People suspected of resistance activity. People suspected of harboring resistors. People suspected of suspecting others. The web of guilt expanded until it covered everyone. Anyone could be arrested. Anyone could be shot. The randomness was the point. Randomness created universal fear. The final tally came in July. 1,300 Czechs executed, 5,000 arrested. The arrests led to deportations, concentration camps, forced labor, death by other means, slower death. But death regardless. The Reich was efficient that way. Multiple paths to the same destination. London declared Operation Anthropoid a success. Churchill praised the mission. Beans received congratulations. The Czechoslovak government in exile gained recognition. The Munich Agreement was nullified. Stalin acknowledged Czechoslovak sovereignty. Roosevelt sent diplomatic recognition. The mission accomplished its political objectives. The cost was never mentioned in the diplomatic cables. Costs were for accountants, not politicians. The Czechoslovak resistance was effectively destroyed. The Jindra network was gone. The safe houses were all compromised. The radio operators were captured. The supply drops stopped. Resistance would not resume for 2 years. The mission that was supposed to inspire resistance had killed it. The irony was noted by historians. Decades later, when noting ironies was safe. Heydrich's funeral was held in Berlin, June 9, 1942. Hitler attended. Himmler gave the eulogy. The coffin was draped in swastikas. The ceremony was elaborate. The propaganda value was immense. The martyr narrative was constructed carefully. Heydrich, the fallen hero. Heydrich, the victim. Heydrich, the symbol. The mass murderer became a saint. History in real time. Truth bent to serve power. The funeral procession stretched for miles. Wehrmacht units, SS divisions, Hitler Youth. The spectacle was designed to intimidate, to show strength, to demonstrate that killing a Nazi only made the Reich stronger. The message was clear. Attack us, and we multiply. Strike us, and we grow. The logic was fascist. The execution was flawless. Heydrich's body was buried in Berlin. The location was kept secret. The SS feared the grave would be desecrated. Even death required protection. Even graves needed guards. The fear was justified. The hatred Heydrich inspired did not die with him. Hatred does not require a living target. Memory is sufficient. The paratroopers were buried in unmarked graves. The Nazis would not give them the satisfaction of memorial. Their bodies were disposed of, quietly, efficiently. The locations were not recorded, or if recorded, not disclosed. They disappeared, as completely as Litis. Different method, same result, erasure. But erasure is never complete. Stories survive. Witnesses remember. History reassembles itself from fragments. The fragments of Operation Anthropoid were scattered, but they were collected, slowly, over decades. The story emerged, piece by piece. Truth assembled from ruins. The Church of Saints, Cyril and Methodicus, became a memorial after the war. The communist government preserved it, not from sentiment, from propaganda value, heroes of anti-fascist resistance. The narrative was useful. The crypt was cleaned. The bullet holes were preserved. The stone walls remembered. Stone always remembers. Tourists came, thousands, tens of thousands. They descended the narrow stairs. They stood in the crypt. They looked at the walls. They imagined 4 men with rising water, with last bullets, with final choices. The imagination was easier than reality. Reality had the smell of cordite, the taste of fear, the weight of certainty. Imagination had none of these. The Moravec family was remembered. Atta survived the war. He was imprisoned in concentration camps. He returned to Prague in 1945. He spoke rarely about his mother, about the cyanide, about his interrogation. Some things resisted words. Some memories were too sharp for language. He lived until 2002, 60 years carrying what he carried. How he did this remained unclear, courage or numbness, or both. Karol Kurda received his blood money. The Gestapo paid him 1 million Reichsmarks as promised. He also received a new identity, a home, protection. He lived well for 3 years. The war ended. The protection ended. The new identity was discovered. The Czech authorities arrested him. 1946. He was tried for treason. The trial lasted 3 days. The verdict was predetermined. He was hanged. April 29, 1947. Justice delayed. Not denied. Litis was rebuilt. After the war, a new village, same name, different location, 2 kilometers from the original site. The original site remained empty. A memorial park. Grass covered the ground where buildings had stood. Roses were planted. The roses grew poorly. As if the earth rejected them. As if blood poisoned the soil. Metaphor or truth. Both seemed possible. The children were remembered. 82 names carved in stone. The stone was black granite. The names were white, stark, permanent. Visitors touched the names, tracing letters with fingers, as if touch could reach across time, as if touch could undo death. It could not. The stone remained cold. The names remained dead. Touch changed nothing except the person touching. The question persisted, whether the mission was justified, whether one Nazi death balanced 5,000 Czech deaths. The mathematics were clear. The morality was not. Philosophers debated. Historians argued. Veterans gave conflicting answers. The debate continued for 80 years. The debate continues still. Some questions have no answers, only positions, only perspectives. only the endless weighing of lives against lives. The Allied perspective was clear. Strategic value outweighed collateral damage. Morale required victories. Heydrich's death was a victory. The reprisals were unfortunate, but the Nazis would have killed Czechs regardless, with or without provocation. The occupation was genocidal. The reprisals were just accelerated genocide, not caused by the assassination, revealed by it. This logic satisfied some, not all. The Czech perspective was more complicated. The families in Lidice had a different calculation. Their dead children purchased nothing. Their destroyed homes gained nothing. The assassination happened to them, not for them. They were collateral in someone else's war, someone else's strategy, someone else's propaganda. The powerlessness was absolute. The bitterness was understandable. Gabčík and Kubiš made their choice. December 28, 1941. When they jumped from a plane into occupied territory. They knew the probable outcome. They jumped anyway. Were they heroes? Were they murderers? Were they both? The answer depended on who was asked, and when, and why. Context was everything. Context was also nothing. Dead was dead. Motivation did not resurrect corpses. The files remained. Boxes of documents, London, Prague, Washington, interrogation transcripts, radio intercepts, after-action reports. The bureaucracy of assassination preserved in triplicate. Paper remembered what people chose to forget. Paper had no sentiment. Paper had no guilt. Paper simply recorded. Dates, names, numbers. The numbers were very large. Operation Anthropoid entered history. The textbooks, the documentaries, the films. The narrative was simplified. 7 men killed 1 Nazi. The Nazi was evil. The men were brave. The reprisals were terrible, but necessary. The simplification served pedagogy. Truth was more complex. Truth always is. But complexity does not fit in textbooks. Complexity requires nuance. Nuance requires time. Time requires patience. Patience is rare. The ultimate lesson was unclear. Perhaps there was no lesson. Perhaps history is not teacher. Perhaps history is simply record. Events happened. People died. The sequence was documented. The meaning was contested. The contest would continue. Forever. Because humans require meaning, even when meaning is absent, especially when meaning is absent. May 27th, 1942 was a Wednesday. Clear skies, temperature moderate, a hairpin turn in Prague, a gun that jammed, a grenade that flew, and everything that followed. The deaths, the reprisals, the erasure of villages, the drowning in a crypt, the bullets in temples, all of it connected, all of it consequential, all of it final. The Sten gun that jammed was recovered. The Gestapo displayed it, evidence of British involvement. The gun was catalogued, photographed, filed. It ended in a museum behind glass. Tourists looked at it. A piece of metal that changed history. The irony was thick. The gun's failure was the mission's success. If the gun had worked, Heydrich might have survived. The grenade alone might not have been enough. The horsehair might never have entered his body. Failure and success were intertwined, inseparable. The horsehair was the ultimate weapon. Not the Sten, not the grenade, animal fiber, bacteria. Biology had no politics. Infection was impartial. Microscopic life killed the architect of industrial death. The scale was inverted. The tiny destroyed the enormous. The weak killed the powerful. The powerless struck down the mighty. The metaphor wrote itself, but metaphor was just story. Story was not comfort, not to the dead, not to the families, not to anyone who lived through it. The church still stands, stone walls, Gothic arches, the crypt below, the entrance hidden behind the altar. You can visit. You can descend the stairs. You can stand where they stood, where the water rose, where the bullets flew, where 4 men chose death over capture. The space is cold, always cold, regardless of season. The cold is psychological, or geological, or both. The stone absorbed violence. The stone retained it. The stone remembers. The final accounting came decades later. 1,300 executed, 15,000 arrested, 5,000 deported to camps, 3 villages destroyed, 400 buildings burned, 273 men shot in one day, 98 children sorted by appearance, 82 children gassed. 7 paratroopers dead, 1 Nazi dead. The ratio was documented. The justification remained contested. Was it worth it? The question echoed through 80 years. The answer changed with each generation. Each analysis emphasized different variables. The facts stayed constant. The conclusions morphed. Flexibility was history's weakness, or strength, depending on perspective, depending on who was analyzing, depending on what they needed to prove. The truth was this: 7 men jumped from a plane into darkness. They landed in snow. They were cold and afraid and committed. They executed their mission. Heydrich died. 5,000 others died. Both statements were true. Both were incomplete. The complete truth was impossible. The complete truth required omniscience. Omniscience was unavailable. What remained was record, document, testimony, fragment. The fragments were out enough. Or they were not, depending on what you needed, depending on what you were seeking, depending on whether answers were even possible. Operation Anthropoid ended on June 18th, 1942, 4:30 in the morning. The last shot in the crypt, the last body pulled from the flooded chamber, the last identification confirmed. The mission concluded. The reprisals continued. The dying continued. But the mission was finished. Success and failure coexisted. Neither negated the other. Both were permanent. Both were final. Both were true. The sound was this: a gun that clicked instead of firing, a grenade exploding against metal, bullets punching through wood, water rising against stone, 4 shots in a flooded chamber. Silence. The silence was longest. The silence persisted. The silence echoed through 80 years, growing neither louder nor softer, simply persisting. The sound of a mission, the sound of a choice, the sound of consequence, the sound, finally, of history, unresolved, contested, permanent, true,